Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome back. I won't hide that I'm disappointed. I truly felt we were making progress. Last time we stood in front of you, we came back and made what we felt was a very strong move, and it was significant in terms of dollar amounts and significant in terms of the platform we ran on and that Minnesotans voted for. And instead of getting a measured response, we got a radical departure from what we've been seeing. And I can't stress that that the taking of the provider tax, the ability to provide health care for over 1 million Minnesotans, 43% of our children, a 27-year, bipartisan, proven program, and now I'm being told at the final hour that it is off the table. This is where a free press will be very helpful, and positive journalism to tell the story, because the following people came up here this last week to tell me that it was absolutely imperative that we kept the provider tax in place. All of these are presidents of CEOs of Minnesota Hospital Association, Tri-County Healthcare, Rock County Hospitals, Pipestone Medical Center, Mercy Hospital, Hennepin Health, St. Mary's Medical Center, Perm Health, Centricare Health, Johnson Memorial, Redwood, Avera Marshall Regional Medical Center, Windham Area, Stanford Health, Ridgeview Medical, Fairview, Lakewood, Alina, First Light, Northfield. This is just the folks that came up. There's 141 of them on the list. And I say this because you're going to hear from Commissioner Franz, a significant offer to move in the direction of compromise that Minnesotans want and expect. Not only did we not get even a slight movement our way, we moved the other way. We chose now that we're going to dip into the rainy day funds, and I don't blame them for the money they're trying to spend, because they're going to go home and seriously undermine the health of Minnesotans and our education system. And I have continued to say, give me a chance, give me an offer, try and reach compromise with us and this movement. But I think the thing we remind ourselves all the time, that budget's not just a fiscal document, it's a moral document, and there are real people behind that. And I'd like Lieutenant Governor to just say a couple words about what taking the provider tax off the table actually means.
Well, we've had a roller coaster of an afternoon, and I think when we talk about this, we know that the Healthcare Access Fund pays for really essential programs like Minnesota Care, medical assistance, and there are folks who rely on this program. And I think it's important that we remember when we're talking about the provider tax and the Healthcare Access Fund, who we're talking about. We are talking about 40% of all children in Minnesota, 40%. 2/3 of the folks who are on Medicaid are seniors. And we're talking about people with disabilities. So when Senate Republicans simply say it is off the table, they are saying children, seniors, and people with disability are off the table. We're willing to compromise, but we are not willing to compromise with some of the most vulnerable people in the state of Minnesota. So we know that there's a group of over 155 organizations, and I know it is thrilling journalism when we read those off to you, but there are a couple of folks that I want to just make sure that we mention, and that is the AARP, believe we should continue to support the provider tax and the Healthcare Access Fund, the American Cancer Society, the American Heart Association, Faith in Minnesota, the Joint Religious Legislative Coalition, LifeWorks Services, the Minnesota Catholic Conference, the Minnesota Hospital Association, Sanford Health Plan, UCare, the ARC of Minnesota. So these are folks with incredible credibility, who are working on the front lines in communities every single day, who are advocates for the very people who will be devastated by having the provider tax off the table. And we simply cannot stand for it. It is irresponsible, it is reckless, and it is cruel.
I'm going to have Commissioner Franz take just a couple minutes to explain to you why they're doing this, why their numbers don't match. And he's going to talk to you, too, about the proposal that they came to me, and I hope everybody's highlighting very, very clearly what they said was only 2 years of balanced budget. He'll tell you the last time they tried to do this, and I think some of you veteran journalists here can guess what year that was, and I bet some of you can even extrapolate what happened to Minnesota's finances after they chose to go down this road. They do not have the capacity to fill the needs that their community is asking for. They've taken rigid pledges of no new taxes, and to try and fix that, they are willing to put healthcare at risk, our fiscal stability, and dive into our rainy day fund and go to 2-year budgeting that, well, the commissioner will tell you what happened last time. So.
Thank you, Governor. Yeah, my name is Myron Franz, Commissioner of Minnesota Management and Budget. And as the state's chief financial officer, I can tell you this last offer does not make fiscal sense. Back in 2002 was one of the last times we tried to do this 2-year budgeting process where you, instead of looking out over the 4-year budget horizon, it was based on 2 years. And many of you will recall that whole decade was a decade of deficits. We didn't solve that problem until 2013 when we created more fair revenue system for Minnesota. And since that time, we've been able to have balanced budget after balanced budget. And their proposal would take this back to a 2-year budgeting process and would eliminate the balance of the tails, what we call the tails of 2 years out in the horizon, to make sure that they're balanced. And it would destroy that common sense of fiscal responsibility that we've been operating under. And as the governor mentioned, not only is that a problem, but the fact that they want to use the rainy day fund is really problematic. You may all recall that it's taken us years to restore the rainy day fund now to about $2.5 billion. That fund was set up to allow Minnesota to adjust to an economic downturn. The goal of that fund is to be able to allow us to respond in an economic downturn when revenues start slowing down quickly. We believe that money should be there and it should stay safe and not come out to be used for operating money. When any business uses operating or a budget reserve or their checkbook or their savings account for operating budgets, you're going to get yourself in trouble. So we're really concerned about this. It destroys the fiscal sense of responsibility that we've tried to build into these budgets for the last 8 years. Thank you.
So you see what's happening here. I think we can't lay it out anymore. I think it's really unfortunate. I guess my disappointment is even higher that this response came 30 minutes after I was willing to move pretty dramatically on what I think are needed transportation funding to try and find a reasonable compromise. Commissioner always talks about this, the rainy day fund. I don't think it's raining right now. They tell us how great the economy is and how well things are. Why would we use the state's reserves at a time? And you know the reason is because their funding numbers for the essentials for Minnesota are so grossly underfunded, they know they can't go back home without putting more money into education, more money into corrections, because that's what's needed. And to do that, they dig into that fund. So disappointment, surprised that they would get here. I don't think it is a good faith effort by any stretch of the imagination, and that's where we stand as of right now. So, any questions?
Saw the proposal and the offer they put on the table, this cardboard with emojis on it. What was the initial thing that ran through your mind?
Well, I think real people, and instead of this dance or whatever for elections. We didn't come here for politics. That's a means to an end. The end is good policy, and it's just frustrating to me because we could have we were moving, I think, in the right direction. I still believe that Minnesotans want that, and we have to figure out a way to get them back to the table to give have a serious conversation.
Any reason to keep meeting tonight?
It's a good question. It's hard to see right now. My expectation was, as I think all of us know how negotiations are supposed to work, I kind of thought I might see something come back on transportation or something else. I mean, just think about that was something that's been in the works for a couple years. I talked to you, Tom, out at Chamber of Commerce out in the West Metro area 2 years ago about what I thought were the needs for that in crafting this bill, and then to come down on that with an expectation, and then this is it's just beyond what I thought they would come back with. So I'm not sure right now.
Is this 2% tax, or the provider tax, is that your line in the sand, yours?
Well, yeah, and I think, and I'm just going to call this out, I heard something very different on your program on Sunday morning that seemed hopeful to me that, okay, this is the way we've been talking about this. This is still in play. I think many of you had extrapolated where a landing pad might be. What do we do with reinsurance or my proposal to do premium assistance and the provider taxes or some way? And now tonight, after we moved, we hear this line in the sand that can't go anywhere. And that in itself, it is so, you heard the names here and what the Lieutenant Governor said, but the just fiscal irresponsibility of it. And again, they're moving to two-year budgeting so they can spend more money and not have to worry about it. This used to be the party of fiscal responsibility. This used to be the party that actually had some credibility to talk to us about how you did budgeting. And they did this. They cannot stand in front of you with a straight face, no matter how many emojis are behind them, and tell you that it is wise to go to two-year budgeting and dive into our rainy day reserve funds so that they can fund programs that we have already funded responsibly and paid for. And so that piece of it is like the linchpin to make it all work. And they have come to you, and again, you have all asked me, rightfully so, and grilled me, where are you willing to compromise? Where are you willing to change? Where are you willing to meet them? And my answer has been I didn't want to negotiate with myself, but I was always willing to make that. You did not hear me talk about red lines because they are irresponsible and don't serve Minnesotans well. They have now, at this hour, this close, put out the biggest of the red lines that how do I come back to them? How do I figure out how to make that work? That's what we're asking ourselves.
One more question, folks.
They treat this as an income redistribution. They're saying that this provider tax is passed on to all patients and private paying patients
Nobody in
at all
healthcare
income
believes
levels.
that. Have they held a press conference where they had healthcare experts in front of you? Have they had patients who've come up here? Have they had the people, and again, if they want to dismiss the Cancer Society, AARP, Catholic Charities, the Hospital Association, Allina Health, I can go on and on and on, 141 hospital CEOs. They're not hospital CEOs. They are politicians trying to figure out how they can tell Minnesotans that they are fiscally responsible and won't raise their taxes. At the same time, they're ripping healthcare out from us. So they can call it whatever they want. This is where our democracy demands a fair accountability. Not the governor said this and the Senate said this. This is experts. This is a 27-year program. They kept calling this, in one meeting, one of them said that, Walz's provider tax. Go ahead and call it that. I would be proud of that because it's 27 years of functioning, 27 years of working, and I've had the courage to talk about how are we going to get this there. And I heard them mention last week, they talked about 2011. They called it their victory. Their victory. This is our biggest victory. That was the exact words. Repealing a nearly 30-year provider tax, repealing it 8 years in the future, not looking at the changes to healthcare over that 8 years and calling that a victory. There is no patient advocates calling for the repeal of the provider tax. So I don't know, in the position that we're in and the responsibility we were given as the governor, lieutenant governor in this administration, our job is first and foremost the protection and the well-being of Minnesotans. And I, from an ethical standpoint, get rid of the politics, get rid of the financial side. From an ethical side of this, I know that the repeal of the provider tax will hurt the most vulnerable amongst us, and they have no plan. Ask them what their plan is to plug in. There is no plan. All they did earlier today was accelerate the use of this by 1 year, and now they've just given up on that and said there's not enough there. We're going to dive into the rainy day funds. So, again, we're here to do the bidding and do the right stuff for Minnesota, but I don't have fair partners to work with right now. So we'll wait and see. We'll back up. We'll see if they'd like to take another look at this, but there's hospitals all across Minnesota that are now hearing this. The one thing I would assure to the seniors, to those with disabilities, to people with children, we'll get this worked out. We will find a place to do this, because when that language is used right here, real people out there get scared. Real people get worried about what's going to happen to them, and real people's lives are negatively impacted, so you can go back up there and have a talking point that you did not raise taxes. They're already raising $850 million in taxes. They're simply redistributing to people who got foreign income coming back to the country, however they do it. They're raising $850 million in tax conformity, but they're going to spend it all on giving tax breaks to somebody. And then they have to figure out how do they make their budget work. So it's irresponsible. I would argue it's why they're holding on to a slim minority in one house of in the Senate, and that Minnesotans expected us to come here, act decent, compromise for solutions, and get the work done without the drama. So we'll be back at it.
Thanks, everybody.